Thank you very much.
Again, my big thanks to all of you presenters for venturing into this very complicated and highly charged area. So we'll just take a very brief, where are we going? I'll make a couple of announcements as well here. In your packets, I said this before, in your packets there's a green evaluation form. We're very eager to have your feedback on this conference, which will also has room for suggestions for future directions and events and possibilities. So please fill one of those out and hand it to a volunteer when you leave, or hand it in at the particularly 3 people here who haven't otherwise spoken today already in some of the discussions today, to spend a few minutes each giving a free vision, to do some visioning. You call it speculation, call it imagination, call it a wish list of future directions and possibilities and desirable possibilities. And Dennis is going to speak first on future directions of desirable future directions of scientific research in ayahuasca and other entheogens, where he thinks we should go and could go. And then Kathleen Harrison about future directions in general ethnobotanical and cultural aspects of our relationship with plants. And then Tony Rich will give some thoughts on his vision of future possibilities of this and related work and its impact in our society. And then Sylvia and I will do a closing invocation of the spirits. So Dennis McKenna first.
Okay, well, thanks. Is this working? Now it is. Oh, I think people will be able to see you then. Okay. Testing. Yeah, well, they say people will be able to see me better if I stand up here. I don't know why they need to see me, but... All right, I'll accept that. Well, Ralph wants me to talk about the future, the sort of future vision for the directions for scientific research on ayahuasca and other entheogens, and he wants me to cover this topic, which is rather open-ended, in 10 minutes of live, unrehearsed, totally spontaneous comments. So, there's a lot to be said, and I don't really know where to start. I have, ever since I was informed that I was supposed to talk about this, I've been thinking a little bit about how to address it, and I think one of the important things to understand is that, in the study of psychedelics, the study of plant medicines, magical plant medicines such as ayahuasca, is one of the places where the limitations of science you're brought face to face with those limitations. I mean, it's really in your face that the scientific method, as we understand it and practice it in the Western scientific paradigm, can carry you only so far. And then you're on your own, or you have to uncover new techniques, or you have to develop new ways of knowing in order to carry you beyond that to the next step. And I think that's part of the challenge, really, with psychedelic research in general, and particularly with research that has to do with plant medicines and people's relationships with plant medicines. I mean, this is, we're looking at a topic here that has evolutionary implications, not simply implications for our own culture, although that certainly is important too. But having said that, I think you can also say that the tools of science, as we conventionally think of science, the scientific method, can take you a fair distance, and we don't want to be premature in throwing out the kinds of things that science can contribute to in terms of furthering this type of understanding of this medicinal relationship and this plant-human symbiosis, because that is what it is, between ayahuasca and similar visionary plants. Science can tell us a lot. We've gotten far with that. I mean, if it weren't for the conventional methods of science, we wouldn't have things like LSD, for example, which, you can say that it's an artificial substance, but it certainly was a trigger that began a cultural and historical process whose resonance is still being felt and likely will be felt probably for centuries. So having said that, I think when you try to focus specifically on the future of ayahuasca research and where is this taking us, I think it may be useful to break this down into several different categories. And there's the mundane categories, and then it kind of builds from there. And the work that we did in the ayahuasca biomedical study was really it wasn't even scratching the surface. I mean, we basically started from a place where, okay, here is an ancient human relationship between plants and people, involving the most important aspects of the human spirit and our relationship to the Gaian mind and to the entire community of species on this planet. A very ancient relationship about which we know basically nothing. Okay, so the task of the first people to look at this from a scientific perspective is a relatively easy one, because nobody's done this. So there's so much that we don't know. Practically anything you do to gather data is a contribution to the field, and that's recognized. And that was really the objective with which we went into this. We were lucky enough to have a context in which this could be studied using scientific methods, and we went out to gather data. We had no particular agenda. We weren't trying to show that this is good, this is bad, this is, it's like there's no data. So let's get some data. Let's try to, on a very basic level, define how ayahuasca works, to the degree that science can understand that. What is its effects on the human physiology? What is the effects on human psychology? So you can go in, you can apply those tools, and you can collect data. And that's what we did, and we did this pilot study, that shows that you can do this. Fortunately, that has been the progenitor of more studies. I mean, now it really started a process. Other people are beginning to do similar studies. There's EEG work going on. There's, more pharmacological work going on. So it spawned a sort of a mini industry of studies of ayahuasca, and that's great. Ayahuasca science is coming to its own, and it's answering these very basic, questions that can fairly easily be answered using regular scientific techniques. So that work goes on, and there needs to be more of it. There needs to be also complementary work, I think, going on more or less what you might call at the basic research level, in the sense that we need to take the data that we collect from the field by working with the plants and with ayahuasca people that have lived with and used ayahuasca for many years. We need to also complement that with laboratory research, because the doorway that ayahuasca opens, if you study the pharmacology of ayahuasca, it opens a doorway really into a basic understanding of human neurobiology and the kinds of inner processes that make us conscious beings. I mean, I think that Eduardo Luna made the point earlier that, ayahuasca is like conscious dreaming, and it really is. I mean, in one sense, we have, dreams, which is usually something that happens while you're asleep. So unless you've trained yourself, if you remember your dreams at all, they're certainly fragmentary. But you have similar neurochemical processes involved. I mean, it seems quite clear, it seems self-evident to me that the endogenous tryptamines and beta-carbolines, as Jace Calloway has very elegantly hypothesized, are involved in the regulation of the dream cycle, in sleep processes, in regulation of the balance between our inner and outer attention. This is all tryptamine, beta-carboline type pharmacology. Well, here you have a model of what goes on in the human brain in a plant-human relationship. So that is worth looking at. In other words, ayahuasca is essentially a doorway into conscious dreaming. I mean, you can have these experiences in dreams, but you don't remember them. Or you can use ayahuasca and experience dreams and the whole dynamic of dreams in a conscious state. It's a tremendously valuable tool for understanding the basic underlying neurobiological, neurochemical mechanisms of human consciousness. This is why it's a real head scratcher that science, has basically dismissed this whole area of entheogens, because, if these molecules are not probes, to understand the mechanism of human consciousness, I don't know what else they are, and yet science, doesn't even want to fund this type of work. And, psychologists are too busy running rats through mazes, and I don't know what they expect to learn from that. But anyway, so here is a neglected tool for the basic understanding of human neurobiology and the neurochemical underpinnings of human consciousness. I think it's important that we remember that. And then you might go, and then the next step is, again, still remaining well within the boundaries of conventional Western science and medicine. There's the whole issue of the therapeutic applications of these things. We call these things medicines. The implication is that, medicines are used to treat sickness. Medicines are used to help people who have illnesses. That's the conventional understanding. Some of the work that we did in the context of the AYAHUASCA project point the way in that direction, indicating that in cases of alcoholism and drug addiction and other types of psychological dysfunction, these things could be tremendously therapeutic. I mean, these are unexplored and undeveloped tools for psychology and for healing. And of course, and again, the AYAHUASCA project is just a small part of this. I mean, I think the bigger part of it is that people's own individual's experience. You only have to talk to people who have had strong encounters with ayahuasca to realize that that this substance turns people's lives around. And again, how psychology, how psychotherapy can neglect this is just a puzzle to me. But so there is the whole issue of understanding it on a basic level, and then understanding how we can use it to heal people and to really help people within that context. And those are that's sort of the basic underpinning. But then there's a couple of other levels beyond that. There's at least one other level, and there may be two if I can remember what the fourth one was. But there's at least one other level where it gets very important, because when Eduardo and I were first traveling in the Amazon in the mid-'80s and sort of kicking around this idea of doing a biomedical study on the ayahuasqueros, what was interesting to us was these people were remarkable psychologically and physiologically, and not simply remarkable in the sense that they were healthy. They were like yogins in a sense, or they had this thing that they did. I mean, this whole thing about the phlegm, and they could pull up this magic substance out of their body, which has clearly got to be of biological origin. I don't know if it's real or not, except that I've seen, you can take it out and photograph it, so it's real enough. And they could produce this material, this substance within their bodies, and use it to perform magical acts. Well, so the real question is, what's going on there? I mean, this is a physiological trick that's pretty cool when you think about it. And and so then we were saying, well, this is remarkable. We need to, poke and prod these ayahuasqueros. We need to see how they do this trick, much in the same way that you might go to India and study a yogin. How do they stop their breathing? How do they control their heart rate? These sorts of questions need to be asked. But then we looked back and we said, well, we can't answer these questions because there's no data. Nobody has even looked at the most basic aspects of how it works. works. So how can you answer these questions? How does ayahuasca work in terms of what you might call superhuman or suprahuman or transcendental human physiology? You know, you first need to accumulate a pile of data so that you understand basically how it works, and then you can start asking these questions about, you know, what you might call shamanic technology or shamanic physiology, you know, the kinds of processes that go beyond what we normally think humans are capable of doing. You know, this idea of doing chemical reactions with your voice or curing diseases with songs. I mean, you know, is this all just hokum? I don't think so. You know, people are doing it every day in the Amazon. Maybe it has, you know, does this have a scientific basis, a physiological basis? Can we study it with the techniques of science? I don't think you can just automatically say, no, this goes beyond science. I mean, I think you need to go down there and find out how far can science carry you in terms of trying to understand, you know, these processes. And so, you know, that's an area that sort of is, you know, you can approach it scientifically, but at some point it may be a jumping off place, you know, where science, you know, you either have to invent a new science or evolve the science that you have into a you know, post-millennial science, if you will, that's capable of answering these types of questions, you know, and then you can approach that. And then I think the fourth area for scientific research is really a more long-term thing, and it may be that you can't approach it scientifically, or it may be that, you know, it's not our thing. And I think that has to do with trying to understand the much longer term implications of the human relationship with plant teachers, the human symbiosis between plants, and the symbiosis between plants and humans. I mean, to look at us now as we exist, you know, as we exist as primates. I mean, we're very unusual primates. And, you know, we as evolutionary products, you know, you're looking at the effects, the evolutionary result of, you know, how long? 4 million years of coevolution between plants and humans. You know, now plants make these secondary compounds. By and large, the conventional thinking, they make these secondary compounds like alkaloids as a way of defending themselves from predators, and, you know, they're repulsive chemicals that make herbivores and insects and things like that not want to eat them. Well, we've taken that equation and turned it completely around. You know, we go out of our way to select the bitterest, most toxic, most physiologically active plants in the environment, and we stuff them down just to see what happens. You know, and what happens is that we have these experiences, which, you know, I think you can, and Terence has made the case, I think, well, and I've made it to some lesser degree, that if you look back at the evolutionary events that made us humans, you know, language, artifact, music, you know, those sorts of things, I mean, I think you can make the strong case that it was, you know, that those things have emerged as cultural artifacts, if you will, as a result of our either deliberate or chance encounters with these physiologically active, these psychoactive plants. You know, it's not too hard to imagine that, you know, if you're a foraging primate, you know, hungry most of the time, and you encounter a mushroom, say, in the environment, and you ingest this because you're, you know, because you happen to be hungry and it's the right kind of mushroom, you know, the next thing you know, you're having these experiences, you know, you're hearing, you know, you're having synesthetic experiences, you're hearing colors and seeing sounds and this sort of thing, you know. You pick up a stick, you start beating on a log and yelling and screaming. Well, you've just suddenly invented language, music, and technology, you know, all in one session. You know, not bad as far as an evolutionary trigger, you know. So, and this is. I mean, I don't know if science can approach this, but I think this is the larger question. You know, we are a part of this web of life on the earth, and we are not in charge. This is again and again, this is what ayahuasca says to me, I think, and other people. You monkeys only think you run things. You're just a part of this process. And that's the real Holy Grail, is to try to understand how this symbiosis, this human-plant interface has brought us to this place that we're at, where now it becomes critical. Are we going to understand it and move forward and try to approach whatever fate, whatever destiny we have, because in partnerships with these things, or are we just going to wreck the whole shooting match and incinerate the planet, and then it'll be just in the annals of galactic history another one of these experiments that got so far and then fizzled out. It's really up to us. And it's not up to us. That's the whole point. It's up to us working within the context of this biospheric web that we find ourselves caught in. We need to try to understand what that is and what our place is in it. We need to rediscover humility, I think. We need to be open to the message. And I think if we're open to the message, the humility will come, and perhaps with that will come understanding. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is exactly research, but I think this is really, if the human species has a task that it must understand if it is to survive and thrive, and perhaps move beyond the confines of the playpen. This is our job, and we're very lucky that we have teachers like ayahuasca to help show the way. That's about all I can say about that.
Thank you. Well, I've been getting nervous in the last hour and a half or so that every good thing I could think of to say was going to be said. We were getting so telepathic here that it didn't matter who said it. But I have a few notes, and I think actually I kind of pick up where Dennis just left off in the symbiotic relationship. And part of what I find really useful in thinking about that impulse of life that wells up and links all of us in this great metabolism is in really trying to look at the world through the eyes of a plant. I mean, they say in the old mythologies in many cultures that every plant has a spirit, and every spirit has eyes, and therefore every plant is watching everything that's going on and talking with every other plant species as well, that they're all equally animated, and of course the animals and all the other spirits that we've spoken of this weekend. But from the point of view of being in the body, looking through the eyes of the plant, what you really, botanically rather than ethnobotanically at this moment, plants really seem to be here to thrive, to proliferate. They have survival strategies. And you can see that when you compare different kinds of different plant species or the plants and the fungi. You see how their strategies, you can track them back, and by really studying, see how they have figured ways to deal with their environment, with their allies and their competitors, lean on each other, avoid each other, and go through adaptations in time to become these successful organisms, successful metabolic expressions that they are. And so specifically here, looking at the vine and the leaf, looking at these two species, and then the other related ayahuasca species, and beyond that, all of them, as plants that have a strategy. Then you look, as Dennis alluded to, actually, at one of the strategies being hooking into human awareness, mean, there are so many species of plants that really don't seem to care whether we're here or not, or in fact, we're a problem for them. But there are many that have, over time, discovered that our appetites and our needs, whether we take it as a drug, whether we eat it, whether we build with it or wear it, that they actually can spread. And the metaphor of the way that plants grow, being primarily either through reaching out, like the tendrils of a vine, and touching down, and the nodes starting roots and starting new plants from those points, or whether it's flowering and fruiting and creating seeds that go out and are carried maybe by other life forms or by the wind and start little islands of the same species elsewhere. These models I look at in thinking of ayahuasca and wondering what's happening to us and what the interface of the plant world and the human world is at this point, and maybe all the way through in its whole history. You know, how has it reached out, and what role are we playing in that germination, pollination, rooting that is happening? I'm just sort of asking questions and offering models for thinking of the future, and to remember that we are, that everything is always in flux. We know that, right? We know that in our best moments, even though we get attached to things as they are in our daily life often. And because everything is in flux, we have to accept that adaptation is really the means of survival for any species on the planet and for any cultural form as well. And I just so immensely admire the native peoples of the Americas, because they have been the most incredible adapters in the last 500 years. They have been so gone through such hell, you know, for the first wave and the decimations, and then such remarkable acceptance of the elements that they could incorporate and use, and like another organism that you might see under fire by civilization, they take in some, they adapt what they've got, they hold on to the core, and they keep on moving out there. And the mestizo culture that Eduardo referred to, the river people of the Amazon, they've been there. Mestizo means mixed. They've been mixed people for a long time, mixed blood people, and they absorb that wisdom of that place and those plants and their Indian roots, and also obviously carry with them their European background and European roots, blended into a culture that seems old enough now that it feels like it's been there always. But they've got their wisdom too, and we shouldn't act like, well, there's sort of just this messy interface. They are the future. In the Amazon, they became the future 400 years ago, 300 years ago, as the blending began to happen. And what is happening here too is part of that kind of adaptation and that blending of cultures, which is tragic when you look at what we think of as a pure historical, cultural mode, an Indian tribe somewhere with their fantastic beliefs and their beautiful rituals and their amazing costumes, and we treasure that, oh, this happened, and now look, it seems to be dissolving before our eyes, and it isn't as beautiful to us anymore, and there is suffering involved, but there is also adaptation going on, and those people that we saw, that we know were there 100 years ago, and now we see are not living that way anymore, they were an adaptation from some former phase. And even the people of the Americas have been crisscrossing and invading each other and allying with each other and all of that for tens of thousands of years. So I encourage us to accept the fluidity of the models and the idea of the vines and the seeds in their reaching out for new ways to grow, new ways to thrive. And I think that is happening in the long view, and that we need to be heartened by that and encourage it. They are our allies. We are their allies if we stay in conscious relationship to them. But I really encourage all of us to be in that level of awareness, or have the impulse toward that level of awareness with all of the botanical world, because ayahuasca is a plant teacher. More than being a plant, it teaches us about all the plants, as has been said in several ways here, and that means paying attention. And we don't have to be taking the tea to hear that. So part of our adaptation in this lifetime that we can do is we can just wake up that much more. And we don't just wake up in the ceremonies and then remember how awake we were during that ceremony. We wake up in between the ceremonies too. And we really tune in. And not just to other people, that's really good that we do that, but to all of the many signals around. And I think that's part of our evolution. I think that's happening, and that's part of the future trend of the portion of us, at least, the job of what I think of in this repressed puritanical culture as we are what I think of as spiritual outlaws. It would be great if we didn't have to feel fear as a part of this picture, but we are, but we do. It's the place we live in, and sometimes, pressure makes things happen. Deadlines make things happen. Pressure makes things happen. We have to pay attention in a certain way because there is this certain constriction around us because of the strange laws and the fears that run through the blood of the ruling hierarchy. And yet we can do this work. We can do it even in this strange atmosphere. Some of us are more comfortable than others with being outlaws. But to be a spiritual outlaw is really an interesting idea. So you can you can think about how it's kind of like being off the grid. Most of us probably live on the grid, but we know of this idea of building a cabin in the forest somewhere and getting our water from the earth and the sun from the sky, and being able to feel what it's like to survive and thrive within nature. Well, spiritual outlaw, using that same model, kind of puts us outside the grid, and just I think that's a good thing to hold on to. I wanted to say in terms of the awakening to other plants and to this level of attention. The author William Lees Teat Moon was speaking about the conquest of the Americas by the Europeans, and he said something like, they came and grabbed the big machinery, but they forgot to ask for the operating instructions. And I thought, well, the operating instructions, really, he must mean by that not just what people knew, the native people who knew how to love the earth and how to live in it without owning it. But I see tobacco as an operating instruction. How to appropriately use the plants that are in these amazing continents, in this piece of nature, how to use them in a way so that they can be allies. And because we didn't ask for the operating instructions on tobacco, for instance, it turned around and bit us. It's got the best survival technique of all, just total addiction, We want to be everywhere. We want to grow everywhere. Okay, we'll make everybody want us, whether they like it or not. And if they'll listen to us, we'll be medicine. If they don't listen, then, we're a monkey on their back. And tobacco is obviously a plant we should be listening to very carefully. And there are, of course, ayahuasca and many, many others. So this idea of following the Native American rules of respect and reciprocity, where you always come with respect and you always give something in exchange for what you've asked. When you ask a plant for its operating instructions, pray for its operating instructions. That's the humility, that's the role you should be on when you go to any plant and you ask, what is it that you're good for? What is it that you can give to me? What may I give to you in exchange? What may I do for you? And in our materialistic, hurried, preoccupied, narcissistic culture, two of the best things that we can give are attention, and for attention we need to give time. And time is the thing that we all think we don't have enough of. So I really encourage you to give time to paying attention to the subtle things and actually allow yourself to be in the mode called prayer when you ask for information. And this, I think, will carry us into a much better relationship to many of the questions we have about ecology, and that great discussion that happened earlier, and how to proceed and do the right thing, and how to tend our medicine plants and tend our medicine sessions as well. And how to be, if you get yourself to the Amazon, how to be there, how to relate to the people there in that same mode, as though they're a plant with secret operating instructions, and you need to actually very humbly ask that they grace you with this piece of information, and you reciprocate in return. Years ago, when I was first in Peru, I heard, there are many myths about the origins of ayahuasca, according to which people are saying them, but the one that I heard at the time was that ayahuasca had come to them when the Incas, had come to the jungle people when the Incas were ruling in the mountains, which was just shortly before and up to the time of conquest, about 500 years ago. And the way I heard it was that the people were living fine in the jungle. They were just doing fine. And that a great white bird, vast wingspan, flew down from the Andes over the jungle and went to the healers in the tribes and went to the wise people and said, change is coming, trouble is coming, and I want to show you something. And he took these people, many of them in different places, the bird did, and showed them the vine and showed them the leaf and said, brew these plants together, because then when the change comes and the hard times come and the loss comes, you will still remember what you really need to know. You'll still remember who you are. And that's the medicine that will carry you through to the future. And so I think that that's part of us, remembering who we are and what that thread, what that where the flow is through history, through people, and through plants into the future. And I went to bed a few nights ago asking the question, how succinct can I get about a message for this ayahuasca conference? And the first words that came to my mind when I woke up in the morning, I didn't remember any dreams, but when I woke up in the morning, it was almost like a country western song came in, just said, treat her right. And so, from what I said yesterday, that can be applied on many levels, and personally I thought my daughter, my mother, myself, treat her right, women, the plants, the medicine, the planet, treat her right. And so that I urge you all to sing that song. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. How was this weekend? Yeah? We may run a little bit after 5. Is that all right with everybody? Not too long, but I'm going to talk very quickly. My purpose right now is really to kind of recap the weekend and to pull us from the discussion of ayahuasca into the future as to where we're going to go with events like these and what's coming up in the future. So, and kind of some contextual things as we went through the weekend. I'm very proud of being the major sponsor this weekend, and I thank all of you for coming. So. And I want to especially thank CIIS for being the educational sponsor and making it all happen, and a special thanks to Kathy Gower for putting every detail together. Thank you, Kathy. And what about the speakers this weekend? An amazing group, and to share their personal opinions, perspectives, and observations I loved, because we got an aspect of the divine from everyone's personal experience. And knowing that no one way is the way, it was great to hear the various different modalities. And of course, the entertainment last night was also thanks to the many artists that brought that to fruition. And I want to pay tribute to the incredible caliber of attendee that was here this weekend, because to me, that speaks to what is happening around the world, that the people who are engaged in consciousness exploration and expansion are really the professionals in the business world, in the industries, in science, in art, in the many things that drive this planet, and are taking those truths with them back into the professions and integrating them into daily life, which is what must be done. Clearly, the tribe is gathering all over the world, in cities and villages everywhere, people just like us here today. And we have to thank the individuals who, like our speakers and publishers of books, went out on the limb, took the courage to bring that information into print in areas where it was hostile to do so, but did it anyway because they were following their call and their inner wisdom. The amazing tools that we have at our disposal today to better understand nature and our integrated place in it must include the internet, the many books, and the presenters around the world. Hands-on experience of consciousness research is vastly exploding. When I first spent a month in Peru, villagers along the Amazon were terrified that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreigner knew anything about ayahuasca, let alone how it should be used or could be used. And today, as we heard, there's ayahuasca tourism going on where you can get in and obtain that information and knowledge. So the confirmation that we are not alone, which is one of the main reasons for my sponsoring the conference this weekend, is clear. And I've heard so many comments from all of you over the last couple days that you had no idea there was this type of community, or that this type of community was specifically involved in your particular area of discipline. And I'm glad of that. I'm proud of that, and I thank you for working with each other and trading emails and business cards. We personally don't have to have all the answers. What we must do is make a personal commitment to get more involved as we leave here, and whatever that involvement for you is, and to begin and further the process of change in our personal and professional lives. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut and founder of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, said this: "We are explorers, and the most compelling frontier of our time is human consciousness. Our quest is the discovery of a new story for humanity, one which so integrates science and spirituality that it reminds us of our wholeness and connectedness, not only to each other and to the earth, but to the inner self most particularly. There are no unnatural or supernatural phenomena, only very large gaps in our knowledge of what is natural. We should strive to fill those gaps of ignorance." So, to me, in order to go into a vision of the future, we also must understand human history is flawed by our very own way. Throughout history, explorers of human consciousness have been the most vilified of heretics. Look at Galileo. It was only a few years ago that organized religion removed his name from the blacklist. Look at Darwin. Whenever science has superseded a man-made form of spirituality, there is huge conflict. Not because the science is wrong, but because the perspective which that science allows us to comprehend destroys the forms of control. What we see emerging ever stronger on a global basis is the breakdown of many forms of control that can no longer be supported. And we always have to remember that spirituality and divine wisdom does not equal religion. Because what we've done over the ages is try to quantify, subjectify, and standardize the divine experience into some form of easily duplicated ritual, which, as we know in our work as consciousness explorers, Ralph's experience on ayahuasca is not my experience. your experience with a certain plant extract is not her experience. And we each experience the divine vibration of energy through us in a distinctly unique way. Science, as well as art, when it is pure and unbiased, without colorization and influence from economic or religious interests which care generally only about their survival, can lead, I believe, to the way to Edgar Mitchell's discovery of a new story for humanity. Look at Einstein. Remember his quotation from Friday evening? The significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. To me, that is a not so subtle reference to altered states of consciousness. His theory of relativity laid the foundation for the thought and the realities which followed, which have allowed the technical revolution responsible not only for the atomic bomb, but for the microchip and many communication, information, and medical processing systems we're just developing today. And indeed, look at Michelangelo. No one noticed until Dr. Frank Lynn Meshberger, in an October 14, 1990 issue of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, pointed out that within the famous painting on the Sistine Chapel lies an anatomically accurate image of the human brain portrayed behind God. And, the creation of Adam, I tried to get a slide of it, but I'm sure you all know the one where Adam and God are reaching out at fingertips. Well, let me quote from Robert Bransfield, MD, who made this little write-up, which I'll give you the internet address to look it up because it's fascinating. On close examination, borders in the painting correlate with sulci in the inner and outer surface of the brain stem, the basilar artery, the pituitary gland, and the optic chiasm. God's hand does not touch Adam, yet Adam is already alive as if the spark of life is being transmitted across a synaptic cleft. Below the right arm of God is a sad angel in an area of the brain that is sometimes activated on PET scans when someone experiences a sad thought. God is superimposed over the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, and possibly the anatomical counterpart of the human soul. God's right arm extends to the prefrontal cortex, the most creative and most uniquely human region of the brain. Kind of makes you want to go, doesn't it? This is the type of metaphorically relevant images that many receive when they request an audience with the great teacher, the Big Mama. From science to art, our Mother Earth and Sacred Vine are ready and waiting to teach us the true reality of nature if we but simply and with sacred intent ask. Always, 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 nature communicates in symbols. And when you go into the rainforest and deal with shamans and other plant experts from around the world, you'll find the cure for snake bite in a plant that has a picture which appears to be a piece of snake skin or a snake's head, or various aspects are all interconnected symbols of one another. Dr. Merschberger's revelation of the genius behind Michelangelo's painting leads me to believe that Michelangelo didn't receive the inspiration from that painting from a bowl of pasta with marinara sauce. Trust me, I'm Italian. So I recommend you check out this amazing bit of information at http:// and this is all one word, mentalhealthandillness.com/creation_of_adam.htm. Okay, all one word, mentalhealth_of_adam.htm. And for the actual full article, once again, it is the October 10th, 1990 issue of JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, volume 264, number 14, pages 1837 to 1841. So I truly believe that the great scientists and artists who've lived in recent history, and certainly those who are creating the internet, left us subtle references to entheogenic agents, either through their writings or through their paintings. You decide if I'm right. I just throw these things out there to disturb us. Speaking of science, I want to take just a moment to share with you some incredible late-breaking information regarding ayahuasca in the field of energy medicine and the measurement of the human aura. My good friend and business colleague for over 10 years, Dr. Beverly Rubik, who's one of the world's leading physicists, she's a former one of the 19 advisors to the National Institutes of Health. She runs the Center for Frontier, or the Institute for Frontier Sciences here in San Francisco, recently hosted a conference entitled Aura and Consciousness, a New Stage of Scientific Understanding. And the guest speaker there was Russian physicist Dr. Konstantin Korotkov. And it was a book by the same name, Aura and Consciousness, New Stage of Scientific Understanding. Dr. Korotkov is professor of physics at St. Petersburg State Technical University in Russia, is vice president of the Union for Medical and Applied Bioelectrography, has published over 70 papers on physics and biology, and holds 12 patents on biophysics inventions, and is also the author of 4 books. Dr. Korotkov's work in studying the human aura recently included measuring the effects of ayahuasca on the human aura. And at his particular event, this came out as an anecdotal reference at the very end of the conference, and I spoke with him for about 15 minutes after. He's not ready to release the information yet because of the waves it has already caused among his peers. But I'll just tell you briefly that you're all familiar with Kirlian photography and the human aura, and how energy medicine is now studying the subtle energetic body and how it relates and picks up and transmits information with plants and with the surrounding environment. And what showed up is that by taking ayahuasca, the human aura opens a wedge into the temple, which indicates to the scientists that an amazing opening has been created for the gathering in and sending out of high-level energy through the brain and through the emotional body. So a lot of the things that are going on, our science is just catching up. So I wanted to make you aware that if you're interested in more information on this, you can contact us through our website or again through the Institute for Frontier Sciences.org. Energy medicine, harmonics, and digital medicine also relates to the various songs that we've heard the shamans talk about. There's much work going on with harmonics and digitizing various compounds to be delivered through music or through harmonic information. So this is all being tied into the internet, where within 10 years from now, it is possible that we will not get shots of nutrients. We will simply put on headphones and listen to the harmonic vibration of that specific nutrient. So again, blow your consciousness open and realize that there's a lot of modalities going on out there, and these are things we want to discuss with you in future events. Are these some things you'd be interested in learning more about? Yeah. Yes? No? Yes? Okay. So, okay, I'm going to go through a few other things really quickly. In order, again, to move forward and beyond the limits of human consciousness, we must be willing to look at our history of the world with objective lenses, to see things as they were, not as we interpret them to be today, but to see them as they were in their original context. It's very important, their original set and setting. Mother Gaia has wisdom much more sacred than anything man could have developed in the last 2,500 years. One of the most amazing things about my first trip to Peru, other than thinking I had a spider bite in my left earlobe, which 5 days later turned out to be several dozen baby spiders, it does screw up with our term of hierarchy in the food chain down in that area, I'll tell you. Was the realization of what Western culture did to those native communities and how the imposition of Western religion, Western thought process, Descartes' mechanization and ripping apart of everything to see what its the individualistic parts do really decimated many of the tribal cultures along the Amazon. And whether everywhere in Peru, as well as throughout all tribal cultures in the world, you'll find massive evidence of entheogenic usage in their original pottery, snuff boxes, paintings, wall carvings, temple chiseling. It's all there, but we try to hide it when we go down and look at it until just recently. Of course, this artwork is usually associated with specific elements of nature. And one of the things that was great about the major earthquake in Peru in the early 80s was that it destroyed many of the churches. And I am irreverent sometimes. Please bear with me. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just trying to get a point of past history out. And what it did was unearth the 6-foot-high Inca stone underneath every Christian church everywhere. And I spent 5 weeks with native guides who would tell me these stories with tears, and I would sob after because of the stories of their families that were killed in the conquest and how happy these people were for that earthquake to show that at the basis of everything throughout Peru is the native stone structure of the temples which celebrated nature and the very elements of Gaia herself. So in those temples, there were, they worshipped the elements of nature, the cow, the deer, the mushroom. And one of the guides in Mayan temples that I went to visit with just a couple of years ago in Mexico, he says, today well-informed guides at the ancient Mayan temples in Mexico chuckle with the tourists as they tell the true story of their land and point out to people that the church could not tolerate images which metaphorically related perfectly the cow dung and the sacred mushroom which grows from it to the Virgin Mary and Christ. The mushroom as the messenger of the divine word whose sustenance and birth comes from nature herself as embodied by the symbology of the cow. And it's just very interesting to listen to these native people take those images that remain on the temples of the sacred cow with the mushroom growing next to it, and how Western religion turned that into a pagan thing when it was really a celebration of the divine in their daily life. So anyway, what that tells me is we cannot let our fear keep us from recognizing the truth. And I want to thank again our women's panel from yesterday. Ralph and I specifically wanted a panel entitled Women in the Ayahuasca Experience to demonstrate the stupidity of the patriarchal systems. I always laugh at the practice when there are separate panels on women, because what I believe is the correct perspective and history of anthropologists. We have to remember that most anthropologists are men, right? Why is that? Well, Western civilizations needed to create a male-dominated field of anthropology because they burned and hacked up all the witches in the early days who held that sacred Gaia knowledge. And women are really threatening the men now due to cloning. And as we enter the age of Aquarius, enter this age of Aquarius and move into the very feminine nature of ayahuasca teaching, we see how important women's roles are now escalating in society. And I think it's a great thing that we're finding the balance now between male and female. Yes? So I'm just trying to get a lot in a few minutes, and I'm going to skip a lot of this stuff. If one thing I do want to say, though, is if we get our perspective on history correct, we can then move forward with a much greater understanding of human consciousness and where it can lead us. For me, man does not need saving. Man needs a spanking. Mankind, which is an integral part of nature, is sacred now and forever. It's all one grand web of life. And I see the challenge for human beings in the sacred work that we're doing is to have the courage and faith to let go and realize that we do not and cannot comprehend the ultimate reality from our current level of understanding and evolution. And from this realization comes the wonderful, wonderful humility that all of creation is one, and that our goal as humans is to continue to seek knowledge and understanding and realize that we're taking steps to integrate all of that together. No one way to the source of the divine. I echo Michael Harner's comments, Jonathan Ott's candor and honesty, and Jeremy Narby's sense of humor when dealing with various entheogenic agents. There isn't one way. My opinion, natural versus synthetic. For me, I don't seem to travel as well on synthetics and mix and match. So again, it's a personal journey. Be watchful and careful of who and what you follow. Remember, there are deluded people in the world. And what they say are divine revelations from Great Spirit could simply be a regurgitation from a diseased psyche. So, take on the empowerment of self that you do have wisdom within, and listen to that inner wisdom as we do this work together. So in closing, I want to say that be careful also of the many insidious ways in which our freedoms here in this country are being usurped. There's pay attention to your local and federal elections, be informed, and then get out and vote. Today, there is a bill which has been co-sponsored by Senators Dianne Feinstein and Orrin Hatch in an effort to control the dissemination of information on methamphetamine. This bill has already passed the Senate, and it's in House chambers now for review. And what it would do is basically make this conference illegal, because what it does is any type of vehicle which disseminates information on a controlled substance can subject that person to arrest and closure of the entity or the way it goes. So pay attention. I thought I had it with me. I'm sorry. We'll 186? 486. Okay. So for me, the U.S. is no longer the home of the free and the brave. We're becoming the pasture of the regulated and the terrified. So let's be careful, okay? As we leave here this evening, let's remember that this program isn't the end. It's just the beginning. And my personal and hope for this weekend is that we all carry forward not only the knowledge that we learn from the presenters and each other, but that we continue to network. And it is nice to know that there's so many of us on the same path, isn't it? So I'd like to quote something from the Kabbalah, which Ralph Metzner shared with me during some work a couple of months ago. If I am not for myself, who will be? If I am for myself only, what am I? If not now, when? And to me, that really beautifully captures the essence of what our deep work with ayahuasca and other agents is really all about. And just have a couple of questions. Did you find this weekend to be helpful for you? Yes?